Live from Bryant-Denny Stadium with special guests, feature stories, and a comprehensive look at Alabama's upcoming game. This is Crimson Tide Kickoff on WVUA 23.
All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome into Crimson Tide Kickoff. I'm Gary Harris. You know, we had a Saturday off last week. We didn't have a game, so it feels kind of strange to be back here after a week absence, but glad to be with you here on CTKO. And, boy, it's a big, big Saturday. You know that. It's Alabama and LSU. I know the Bayou Bengals are 4-4, and Alabama is second in the playoff rankings, so it looks like a mismatch. It's 28.5-point line, but LSU's talented. Do not forget that, regardless of how the season's gone, regardless of the fact that Coach O will not be the coach after this season is over. This team will be motivated, and they will be ready to play tonight a little after 6 o'clock on ESPN, or you can listen to it on the Crimson Tide Sports Network with Eli Gold, John Parker Wilson, and the crew. It is going to be a big game regardless of that 28.5-point favorite. Don't pay attention to that. All right, we're going to get you ready for the game today. Let's go, as always. We begin with our Bama headlines.
For the latest on the Crimson Tide, you don't need the newspaper. You need Bama headlines.
And both teams will come in refreshed after their bye week. Since the arrival of Nick Saban, Alabama has been very good coming off byes. Of course, they've been good period at playing in games. And he looks to add to the win column today against a battered and bruised LSU team, which, as I said, will be looking for a new head coach, already looking for a new head coach. Coach O's out after the season. Now, before the season kicked off, the game was set up to be a big one. It looked like it could be a bounce-back year for LSU, but that has not been the case. The Tigers, as I mentioned, at 4-4. They've had opt-outs. They've dealt with injuries. They're missing a lot of players on both sides of the ball. But as I said, they'll be ready to go. Today's edition of CTKO features big recruiting updates for Alabama basketball. Plus, we'll hear interviews with former Alabama quarterback Jay Barker and rowing coach Glenn Putyrae, and Tuscaloosa County Economic Development Authorities Daniel Winningham and Max Snyder. All right, Alabama is second in the initial CFP rankings, the College Football Playoff rankings, which came out on Tuesday night. Now Alabama must maintain that position through the final month of the regular season. The Crimson Tide spent the bye week getting rested and getting ready for the final stretch. Head coach Nick Saban said the team spent last week healing up, and he knows his team is in good shape physically. But there's no way to tell how a team will respond in terms of its mindset until game time. Give the players credit. Defensive lineman Fedarian Mathis and company are saying all the right things this week.
You know, you remember for what you do in November. That's what we say around here. And so, you know, we just got to grind harder, just, you know, keep the main thing. And that's, you know, going out and being successful every day.
I don't think these players should be anxious about outcomes. I think they should stay focused on, you know, the process of what they need to do to get the outcome that we have, that we want to accomplish for our team.
Now, Alabama has dominated this series against LSU as of late. The Tide has won 9 of the last 10 against the Bayou Bengals. But that one loss, it still sticks with the fans and the players. Just 2 years ago in 2019, the Crimson Tide and LSU both unbeaten going into this mega matchup at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Brian Robinson still remembers that LSU won the game and that the Tide felt disrespected. LSU players stomping on the logo at midfield, and then a locker room celebration that got out on video and went viral with Coach O basically saying, "We own Alabama." Robinson, who was a junior in 2019, plans on using this to fuel his fire tonight against the Tigers.
Oh yeah, for sure. That's something that we keep lingering. We make sure people know, just the disrespect that was with that, just how it made us feel, and everything we got to do to make sure that that don't happen again.
And earlier this week, Coach O was asked about the infamous locker room celebration from that trip to Bryant-Denny Stadium when he just, he went crazy. He said he regrets that cell phone video got out, that it was only meant for the players and the coaches inside that locker room. And I get that. But in this cell phone era, boy, if you say it, you got to expect to see it at some point. All right, as we take a look at the numbers, in just 15 games, Nick Saban And Alabama 11-4 versus LSU. Remember, they played twice in 2011 regular season and then again in the BCS National Championship game. The 4 losses are the second most against an SEC opponent, though, for Nick Saban, one behind the 5 losses to Auburn. And during the matchup on this Saturday night, LSU is going to be missing a lot of defensive starters, including basically their entire secondary. All the schools head coach Nick Saban has won championships at will be represented at Bryant-Denny Stadium tonight. Of course, he won 6 at Alabama, but he won 1 at LSU in 2003. Well, there's a good chance that fans will see the return of outside linebacker Drew Sanders tonight. Crimson Tide head coach Nick Saban says Sanders has been able to practice all week, and as long as there aren't any unexpected setbacks, we could see him playing tonight against LSU. Sanders has missed the past 3 games after he injured his hand in the Tide's victory over Ole Miss. Well, weather-wise, what a glorious November football Saturday it is. CTKO weather specialist Brianna Duncan joins us now in the studio with the forecast. Brianna, I know it's a little chilly outside, but my gosh, it's beautiful.
You know what, Gary, I feel like, when Richard Scott's normally in here, we always fight about beautiful weather, and I think me and you were on the same page. Love the cooler weather this morning. We'll continue to have that throughout the day. We have mostly clear conditions all throughout central Alabama. If you're here in Tuscaloosa, expect cooler conditions all throughout the day, starting off at 2 p.m. in the lower 60s as we head on into the evening hours. Kickoff to be in the upper 50s and ending our evening in the upper 40s. Temperatures pretty chilly all right now. Gary, back to you.
Thank you, Brianna. It's November. It's supposed to be cool. We'll check in with you again a little bit later. Well, coming up on CTKO, we mentioned earlier that the LSU depth chart will be shorthanded for this matchup against Alabama. What big names will be absent on the field for the Bayou Bengals? Also, training, family, and football. CTKO's Dylan Morgan visited a local workout facility where the goal is not just to get athletes scholarships, but to also shape their character. And later, we'll recap the Alabama women's basketball exhibition game this week. Don't go anywhere. CTKO is coming right back.
You're watching Crimson Tide Kickoff on WVUA 23.
And unfortunately, he got hurt. And then unfortunately, he got hurt again this year. And things happened that way to where he thought that he had to move on and take a shot at another place. Joe Burrow did the same thing. It worked out for him. I hope the same thing works out for Miles. He wants to play pro ball. I hope he gets that shot.
Yeah, remember, Miles Brennan was supposed to be the man following Joe Burrow, but injuries, as you heard Coach O say, just really set him back. Last season, though, he still threw for 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns. He will be in demand in that transfer portal. You can bet on that, but Miles Brennan's career at LSU is over. And welcome back to Crimson Tide Kickoff. I'm Gary Harris. Entering November, LSU looks remarkably different from the team that started the season, ranked in the top 20 in the nation by the Associated Press at number 16. Look at the list of LSU players that are either out of the program completely or not going to be available. You see quarterback Miles Brennan. Look at the running backs. John Emery, remember last year, had a great year. Keyshawn Boutte, one of the best wide receivers in the country. Tight end has been hit. Offensive line has been hit. And on defense, my gosh, that secondary, Derek Stingley and Ricks, two of the best corners in the country, not available. The safety, Major Burns. It's tough for any team, regardless of how talented, to overcome this many losses. Well, Gene Chizik was fired only 2 years after winning a national championship at Auburn, and now Coach Ed Orgeron is on his way out, just 2 years after winning a national championship with the Tigers. So what's the deal? Well, it means you can have a great team, and you can never take that away from those coaches. But to build a great program, you've got to be able to not only get to the top, but stay at the top. That's what makes Nick Saban so remarkable, is that every year he wins. In his press conference this week, he gave some insight into how he has had continued success in Tuscaloosa.
You have to have, players that are there to also step up, be ready to play, because you're always going to lose a whole bunch of good players. And they lost a whole bunch of good players after they won the championship. We've lost a whole bunch of good players.
Well, high school players want to get to college. College players want to get to the NFL. That's the goal. And they're working hard to get to the next level. And many young athletes are turning to outside their programs to get them where they want to go, especially right here in Tuscaloosa. I'm joined now live in the studio by CTKO's Dylan Morgan with more on that story. Dylan?
Hey, Gary, that's right, especially at the lab run by former Alabama football player Donnie Lee Jr., where he and his team are trying to develop much more than just the physical tools needed to excel on the field, which is why one former Paul W. Bryant star chose to roll with the Tide.
The ultimate goal is to just beat the competition, and our competition is the crime rate. Unfortunately, the crime rate has been growing significantly in Tuscaloosa. A lot of the kids that you see working out on a daily basis have been impacted by that very acutely. So, you know, it's just giving them a positive environment, giving them a positive outlet. So the main goal isn't necessarily to get X amount of guys scholarship offers or get X amount of guys to the league. We want to control what we can control, and that's keeping them with us and, you know, just helping them develop their character and keeping them out of the streets.
One of those products of that positive environment has been former Stampede star Brylan Lanier, who's been around Lee and his facility since his brother, former Alabama walk-on Joshua Lanier, trained there during his time at Tuscaloosa Academy.
When I first met Brylan, he was a little boy, man. He was a kid running behind his big brother, but he was always hungry and always eager to learn. You know, he always had the work ethic, and God gave him the intangibles with his size. And so I told him, and I said, hey, you've got potential, but potential is probably the most disrespectful phrase someone can say about you. You know, potential means that it's unrealized, that you haven't done anything yet. So, you know, kids like Brylan are what makes it special to me, to be able to see him, to be able to see his brother in the positions that they're in life. Most importantly, the role that he's playing as a father. I hope that one day that he looks at me more so as a trainer for fatherhood than he looks at me as a trainer for football, and then my goal will be accomplished.
And because of that goal by Lee Jr., Lanier made sure he was the first one he called when he thought about transferring back home.
When I knew I was having my GFM, I tried to get closer, so that's why I committed to Georgia State. And I ain't gonna lie, Danny was like the first person I called. I'm at Georgia State. It's like my jet finna come. Maybe like 3 days before he came, I called him, I talked to him. When I made that decision, really no-brainer, like I could be closer to home. I could be with him every day, you know, playing with the best team in the nation, so why not? That's basically what he told me, and that's what I felt like it was the best decision for me.
And thanks to those lessons from Lee and his team, Lanier has been able to keep progressing on the field for Alabama football while tackling one of the toughest jobs out there, continuing to be a great father to his son. Reporting for CTKO, I'm Dylan Morgan. Gary, back to you.
Thank you, Dylan. You know, it's home sweet home, right? Well, when we return on CTKO, Alabama men's basketball had a great week on the recruiting front. Man, red hot. We'll take a look at some of the new commits, and we'll hear what some current players have to say about the upcoming season, which begins next week. Also, unlike NCAA-sanctioned sports at Alabama, not all the sports at the university are properly funded. Club sports, for instance, CTKO's Alex Booth will go in-depth on the sacrifice that many club athletes make at UA so that they can play. Keep it tuned to CTKO. Bama women's basketball played an exhibition game at Coleman Coliseum on Thursday night against Alabama-Huntsville. And boy, the Tide rolled, got great performance from the bench and beat UAH 87-41. JUCO transfer Nia Daniel had 19 points, shooting 7 of 9 from the field and 3 of 3 from three-point range. And in the first quarter, Alabama wasted no time, going on a 16-0 run, highlighted by multiple threes from senior guard Hannah Barber, who is really talented. Alabama men's basketball is ranked to start the season for the first time since 2011, but it's not about where you start in sports. It's about, of course, where you finish. With a lot of the former players from last year's team moving on to professional basketball, this team is focused on making another great run like they did last year, winning the SEC regular season and tournament championships and getting to the Sweet 16 in the NCAA tournament. And with veteran guards like Javon Quinterly and Jaden Shackelford, the team feels like it can carry on what it started last year. But there seems to be no doubt that the addition of a freshman at guard, J.D. Davison, is going to help this team as he's fitting right in.
You know, he's a great player. He's definitely exceeded expectations in the coach's eyes. And, well, I knew he was good, but you know what I'm saying. But, yeah, no, we're pretty comfortable on the court together, and, you know, we're looking forward to, you know, the exhibition and our first game November 9th.
And what a huge week for Alabama basketball in recruiting. The Tide picked up 3 top-rated recruits, including Brandon Miller. He's a consensus top 15 player in the country out of the Middle Tennessee area, rated a number 3 small forward. He chose the Tide over Kansas and professional options in both Europe and the NBA G League. His father, Darryl Miller, is a former tight end on the Alabama football team. Power forward Noah Clowney out of Dorman High School in South Carolina, a top 100 recruit, listed as a 4-star, 6'9", 205. Chose Alabama over Indiana and Virginia Tech. And finally, later in the week, power forward Nick Pringle, formerly of Wofford, now at Dodge City Community College in Kansas, 6'9", 220, rated the number 1 junior college power forward and the number 2 overall player in the country in the JUCO ranks, according to 24/7 Sports composite JUCO rankings. I'd say that's a pretty good week on the recruiting trail. Well, the University of Alabama has allowed students to participate in club sports for many, many years. CTKO's Alex Booth has more on what the club sport athletes have to do, because it is strictly for the love of the game.
What is the cost to compete? You hear athletes talk about time and work put into the sport, but what's the financial cost? That's the question club sports face at the University of Alabama.
As a club sports program, we don't fall under the athletics department like most people would think. So all the operations that need to get done for practice, game days, everything like that, travel is through us, and we're doing that in between classes, in between jobs, and in between the practices that we do have.
Alabama currently has 35 club sports teams. Commitment is something these students have to have in order to participate on those teams. These clubs also have to think of creative ways in order to raise money to be able to compete.
Getting enough money to get everything set up, putting your name out there for club sports, because the way the school works is you can't really go out and recruit people, so you kind of have to hope enough people come to the school who want to play the sport.
All the clubs here apply for financial funding. However, they have to be prepared to pay for it out of their own pocket. Take water polo, for example. They attend about 3 tournaments per year at $100 per tournament entry fee. Then there's another $100 in hotel and travel fees. That's before you even get to food, gas, and entertainment for the weekend. All of that just for an opportunity to compete. There's more to the challenges club sports holds than just the financial side of it. There's a large time commitment as well.
We practice, 4 times a week, games on the weekends, a lot of away games where we're traveling 6 hours to Kentucky, 7 hours to South Carolina. Guys make sacrifices throughout their whole week just because they want to be a part of this brotherhood and they want the opportunity to compete.
Although the cost is great, club sports do get the benefit of certified trainers. The same corps that looks after Alabama-sanctioned sports works with the university's club programs as well. In Tuscaloosa, Alex Booth, CTKO.
Thanks, Alex. Well, coming up on CTKO, we'll hear what LSU players had to say this week ahead of the matchup with second-ranked Alabama. Also, CTKO's Matthew Travis will take us behind enemy lines and talk to LSU beat writer Wilson Alexander to give us the insight, the scoop on the LSU perspective. And we're back on Crimson Tide Kickoff. I'm Gary Harris. Well, stop me if you already heard this before on this show. LSU's missing a lot of players. Defensive end Mason Smith questionable for tonight's game with an injury. LSU head coach Ed Orgeron says he's been on crutches since Tuesday, but the team hasn't ruled him out for tonight's game. But as many as 12 LSU starters from the beginning of the season could be missing this game tonight. Not just injuries, but players opting out and transferring out of the program. In fact, Coach O was forced to cancel practices, he said, in the bye week due to a lack of available players. Hadn't heard that one. Now, that's a stark contrast from the situation LSU found itself in the last time they visited Bryant-Denny Stadium back in 2019.
I was sitting out there thinking, wow, how things have changed. Last time we going over there, I was sitting on my porch out there. I knew if we win that game, we had a chance. But we had to go through Alabama, and that was a big victory for us. Things are different now, but it's still LSU, Alabama. My job is to get these guys to play as hard as we can. We're going to be prepared and we're going.
I'm going to be prepared and we're going. And so regardless of the storyline being the players that aren't here, the players that are going to be here and playing the game, they're going to play hard. As I said, LSU's still very talented. Do not forget that. The Tigers say they must run the football against this Alabama defense, which, of course, is easier said than done. Remember, Alabama held Tennessee to 64 yards rushing. The Vols were averaging 250. CTKO's Matthew Travis went behind enemy lines with Wilson Alexander of the Baton Rouge Advocate, and he has more on LSU coming into this contest.
Thanks, Gary. This week I spoke to Wilson Alexander, who is the LSU beat reporter for the Advocate, and he told me this game is going to be an interesting one for LSU because they're going into it without multiple starters on defense.
Well, Ed Orgeron said this week that they would have to install a few defensive wrinkles, but at this point in the season, your game plan is kind of what, you're not going to change your defense. You're not going to go from running a 4-3 to a 3-4 or something drastic like that. You can't do too much. At the end of the day, LSU is going to have some players step up in this game who are really third-string guys at some places, particularly on the defensive side, really only on the defensive side, because on the defensive side, you're looking at 8 starters who are not going to be in this game.
At the start of the season, today's game was one many circled on their calendars, expecting it to be one of the best games of the year. Now the Tigers are 4-4, and Alabama is a 28.5-point favorite. And because of that, LSU's goals coming into today have changed drastically.
I guess covering or showing some signs of improvement in life, really, because, you've got 4 games left in the year, but this is kind of one of those games, they've lost 3 of 4. You're coming off your bye week, just show some fight. That's really what they need to do to give themselves maybe a little bit of confidence that they could at least beat either Texas A&M or Arkansas and make a bowl game.
Today is the last time Ed Orgeron will come to Bryant-Denny Stadium as the head coach of the Tigers, as the two have agreed to part ways at the end of the season, and for that reason, LSU's game plan has changed in a big way.
And he said the same thing this week. They have to score touchdowns. They can't settle for field goals. And so that could end up creating a really lopsided score because they're not settling for, 3 points sometimes down there, even though they have probably the best kicker in the country. But he sort of understands, this is a really good offense, and they're not going to be able to do that. And so you're going to see them take a lot of risks. And if they somehow all pan out and click, then maybe LSU will have a chance, but it's going to be hard for that recipe to have success.
We hear it every week, but it remains the truth. When you play Alabama, you have to play clean football and limit your mistakes, because if you don't, Alabama is going to capitalize and make you pay for them. And that is exactly what Alexander told me that the Tigers have to do in order to have a chance in today's game. Reporting for Crimson Tide Kickoff, I'm Matthew Travis.
Great update, Matthew. All right, let's look back at the history of Nick Saban versus LSU. In 2007, it was a home game, but in 2008, he went back to Baton Rouge for the first time since leaving LSU. What a game. Alabama won in overtime. Rashad Johnson, now the sideline reporter for the Crimson Tide Sports Network, had 3 interceptions, tying the school record, including one in overtime to give LSU the loss and hand Nick Saban a huge victory in his return to Tiger Stadium. 2011, it was the game of the century. Number 1 LSU versus number 2 Alabama. And boy, these two teams went head to head and battled, and it was physical. 9-6 in overtime. Not a touchdown in the game. LSU won it. And over the next 4 years, 45 players who participated in that game were drafted by NFL teams. That's the most players drafted from a single regular season game. In fact, I don't see we'll ever see that record broken. Amazing. 2012, though, in the national championship game that same season, Alabama got payback. Trent Richardson, the only touchdown in the game. LSU could not do anything on offense. Alabama won it 21-0 to win the national championship and get some payback for the only blemish during that 2011 season. Well, when we come back, more history between the two teams. Former Crimson Tide quarterback Jay Barker will take us down memory lane and revisit a couple of classic battles that he played in. One went Alabama's way, one did not. And later, in his press conference this week, Nick Saban touched on the current situation with former Crimson Tide wide receiver Henry Ruggs III. We'll have the details. Crimson Tide Kickoff will return right after this. And welcome back to Crimson Tide Kickoff. I'm Gary Harris, and joining me now is the winningest quarterback in Alabama football history. I know there have been a lot of great records by quarterbacks here in the last 15 years or so, but Jay Barker still is the winningest quarterback, 35-2-1 in almost 4 seasons as a starter. He joins us to talk Bama football this morning on CTKO. Good morning, Jay. I appreciate it.
Gary, how are you, my man? I can't believe we're already at LSU weekend. My goodness.
And I got some LSU memories that I'm going to get to with you in just a moment. But first, just your thoughts on, you played for Gene Stallings. People forget he won 70 games in 7 years when you only played, 11 games and 12 games a year. And, of course, won the 92 National Championship. You were on quite a run as a quarterback, as I said, your record. But to see this run that Nick Saban's on for like 12 years now, are you amazed by it?
Unbelievable. And, the 6 national championships is one thing, but just the amount of players that he's put in the pros, the amount of coaches now that are a part of his DNA that are now coaching or that have gone on and had tremendous success. You got the top 4 teams in the country right now, 1 through 4 in the CFP that all have DNA from Nick Saban, and one is the man himself. So, yeah, I tell you, and to have Braxton, my son, and other people that I've known have a chance to go through that program and be there with Coach Saban, his coaching staff, and just the process, the philosophy, and there's no surprise at all as to why they're winning and how they won, and especially with different coaches, different players, guys leaving early. I mean, the transfer portal now, he just figures it out, and he's got an unbelievable process, and he's more about the building of men as much as he is about winning games.
Absolutely. All right, Alabama and LSU, what a series this has been over the years. And for you, of course, you redshirted in 1990, but Alabama football teams that you were a part of, 4-1, 3-1 while you were playing. But I know the one that sticks out is going to be 1993 because you had gotten injured against Ole Miss. Brian Bergdorf got the start in Bryant-Denny Stadium at quarterback while you were out. You had a 31-game unbeaten streak on the line. The 28-game winning streak had snapped against Tennessee when they tied you 17-17. But a 31-game unbeaten streak. LSU is not very good. And they come into Bryant-Denny. You could only watch. Brian Bergdorf got the start. David Palmer came in at quarterback late and almost led a comeback. But you lost that game 17-13. What do you remember about that game, even though you didn't play?
Yeah, it was tough. We had gone 91. I went down. My first start was at LSU. Then 92, the realignment. We had to go back and play them back-to-back years in Death Valley. So I was out. John Stevenson was out. I think Sherman Williams was out that game as well. There was about 3 or 4 major starters in the offensive side of football. I think one of our defensive guys too. We were in our letterman's coach. We're on the sideline trying to figure out how to help these guys. And the LSU just came out with a great game plan. We didn't execute well on the offensive side of the football. I think we went from Brian to Freddie to David. And then David, came in and started running around, making plays, great quarterback in high school. And as you said, almost brought us back. But Curly Hallman, that day was just his day. But it was hard because standing on the sideline, as you talked about, 31 straight games without a loss. We tied to Tennessee just a few weeks before, but we'd gone 28 straight without losing before that. And to see that snap like that, I always tell people, I'm like, I feel like the streak wasn't snapped at that point in time. It wasn't until the Auburn game because most of us weren't playing. But yeah, it's been an interesting series over the years, kind of back and forth as far as who wins there and who wins here. But this is probably one of the craziest years for me. Just looking back on 2019, Coach O, what he said in midfield, and this is our house. We're going to own them in recruiting. And I was talking about that on the show, Gary, is that one thing is to get there to the mountaintop, but how do you sustain it? And they have not sustained it. And now he leaves at the end of the year, but there's Coach Saban, who just keeps his mouth shut, wins games, wins championships, and is able to sustain greatness. And that's the difference between Alabama and LSU right now.
Absolutely. Winning a national championship, you can never take it away from the team and the coach, but winning one means you have a special team. To do it over and over means you have a special program. Let's go back to 92 because you mentioned it, Jay, kind of the anomaly of the schedule with the expansion. You had won down there in a very close game in 1991, 20-17. And in 92, when you went to Baton Rouge, I remember it was a Saturday afternoon game, not a night game, but we knew Alabama was good. I'm not sure at that point we knew how good Alabama was. Not that LSU was a great team, but you just physically manhandled them that day. I remember the running game with Chris Anderson and others, 31-11, and I was at that game, and I remember telling some people after that game, this is a national championship caliber team. You might have already felt that way, but was that game, the way that you handled them on the road, is that when it kind of clicked that you might have a team that could go all the way and go undefeated?
Yeah, definitely. And, and that's a tough place to play, like you said. And I think each game we just kind of grew with a lot of confidence. And I think it was after that game that we found out that Washington had gotten beat.
That's right.
And we were moving into that number 2 spot. Well, at least we felt like we would, based on where we were sitting at that point in time. So, we lost that game in Florida in 91, and we knew from then on, that taste we had in our mouth after that game was just like, we never want to feel this or have this again. And we really, I mean, that loss really brought us together as a team, as a unit, and chemistry that we created that allowed us to win so many games. But you're right, that LSU game was, we knew we had to go into LSU, and it was going to be tough. It's back-to-back years, and but we did it. You know, we were able to pull off the victory, and I think, you know, we grew and learned a lot from that night.
Yeah, and beat them again in '94 there in Baton Rouge. All right, 30 seconds, Jay. Tonight's game.
Okay.
Alabama's a 28.5-point favorite. But as you said, just 2 years ago, LSU came in here and won. This is Coach O's last go-round. You know you're going to get LSU's best shot. We know that. Can they hang around into the second half, or are they just too shorthanded?
Yeah, you can't. I mean, here's the thing. I mean, Gary, is, you know, you got athletes on that side of the ball that were recruited like, you know, the same style. When Saban kind of built that kind of metrics of what he wanted for each player, it's changed over the years. LSU's kind of changed with us. So, you know, football's about matchups. They've got the athletes to match up, and you don't want to let a team like that get any confidence early or be able to stick around with you late in the game. They're going to throw the kitchen sink at Alabama because, you know, they're going to throw it all out there for Coach O. It's the last time to play Alabama. Being at LSU as a coach will be at the end of the year, will be done. So I think it's, you know, it can be a dangerous team. Even though I think Alabama should win this big, they just got to take care of business and take care of business early and often, and get a big winner against LSU.
Absolutely, Jay. I appreciate it, folks. Remember, you can listen to Jay on the Jay Barker Radio Network every day, noon until 2 on weekday afternoons. Have a great game tonight, Jay. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Roll Tide.
All right, we'll be back on Crimson Tide Kickoff right after this. And welcome back into Crimson Tide Kickoff. I'm Gary Harris. Well, Alabama rowing had its first home regatta of the season last Saturday, taking on Clemson on the beautiful Black Warrior River. Alabama's A crew took the win in the pairs, and the B crew beat the A crew in an inter-squad 4. For the freshman novice 8s, Alabama's A crew took second place behind Clemson's A crew. CTKO's Grace Brister spoke with Alabama rowing coach Glenn Putyrae about the first home race and what the squad hopes to achieve this season.
Thanks, Gary. Alabama rowing finished up the fall with strong performance last weekend on the Black Warrior River, which has fans excited for what they'll see in the spring. Crimson Tide rowing head coach Glenn Putyrae is here to talk about that. Coach Putyrae, thanks for joining us, and congratulations on last week's race.
Thanks for having me.
Tell me your thoughts on last week's race. What are some of your takeaways?
I think anytime you get to race in the fall, it's a good opportunity to check and see how the team is progressing, and to get a quality opponent like Clemson to come in and race us here gave us a good opportunity to test ourselves in a couple different formats and get some different formats, different lineups, and give ourselves a little bit of, more of an indication of where the team is right now. And, we were pleased with the results, no doubt about it.
Following last season's success, reaching the NCAAs for the first time in program history, did that raise the bar of expectations?
Absolutely. I mean, the team was excited to make it to the championship, but now the team wants to, keep climbing that ladder to the top. And, every time you get a chance to race or you're training every day in practice, they're all thinking about how are we going to continue our progression and push ourselves as far as we're capable.
Based on the schedule and a split season, do you typically reevaluate goals in between the fall and the spring? Do you have new goals based on what you saw in the fall?
I don't think our spring goals change. I mean, we start the season out with what we think is reasonable, but also what we think is achievable. And we spend the year working and training towards that goal. I think for, when you end a fall and you progress towards the winter and then the spring, I think right now we'll be meeting with the athletes before they go home from break and devising a plan to help them continue progressing individually and come back together in January and, get back together as a team and start that final drive towards June.
Thank you, Coach Putyrae, and good luck the rest of the season.
All right, thanks for having me.
Alabama's rowing team has a 4-month break but returns February 26th at Clemson. Stay tuned to WVUA 23 for highlights and the latest information on the team. Reporting for CTKO, I'm Grace Brister. Gary, back to you.
Thank you, Grace, and thank you, Coach. Well, music has always been a big part of the in-stadium experience for Alabama football game days. And, you know, it's guaranteed that the song choices are going to impact the stadium's environment. CTKO's Tatum Vaught is live in the studio to tell us more about the reactions, and there have been many, of Alabama fans and students to this year's playlist inside the stadium. Tatum?
Well, Gary, it's no secret. From an uproar on Twitter to word of mouth, Alabama fans have been unhappy with the recent song selections in Bryant-Denny this year. I talked to students to see why a good playlist is key to a successful in-stadium experience.
Bryant-Denny, like, it's not just a football game, it's a production. So obviously, like, the playlist, it's got to be, like, the soundtrack has got to be right.
This season, Alabama Director of Athletics, Greg Byrne, has taken some heat for the Bryant-Denny playlist. It has included songs like Moves Like Jagger by Maroon 5 and Fancy Like by Walker Hayes.
I think a lot of people who come to Alabama football games, like, they're kind of like, they come in with like a huge expectation, and like music is one of those things, like, if it's not good, like, it's gonna be disappointing.
It's just like songs from like 2010 that nobody wants to hear anymore at a football game.
It's impossible to please over 100,000 people, but fans want songs that force the crowd to get loud and stay engaged in the game.
I think he should be focused on trying to play the music that the players want to hear, because obviously we're all there to see them perform and, you know, do their best, and they're not going to be able to do that without something to hype them up, some kind of good music, stuff like that.
In fact, there is just one song that all fans can agree should be on the playlist for every game.
Keep Dixieland Alight. That is the best part of it every game.
If that goes, I go. Like, it has to stay.
Like Dixieland Delight and Sweet Home Alabama get the crowd and team excited like no other. Byrne intentionally waits until the second half to play these songs. Live in the studio for CTKO, I'm Tatum Vaught. Back to you, Gary.
Thanks, Tatum. I tell you what, I think the Alabama game experience is one of the best I have ever been around. So there's always going to be a little bit of debate, but it's pretty good. We'll be back with more CTKO right after this.
Welcome back into Crimson Tide Kickoff. I'm Mike Royer, and we want to take a little bit of time on today's program on game day to talk about our area, how it's growing, and how important a big day like this is to our community. Joining us today, two guests from the Tuscaloosa County Economic Development Authority. We have Danielle Whittingham and Max Snyder. I wanted to say Willingham. That's another family. You're the Whittingham family.
The Whittingham family.
And you're the executive director of the authority. I prepared for this interview by going to your website so I'd know what you do. We don't have time to talk about everything you do. The authority and what you all do and your staff touches anything that has to do with growth, economic development, attracting business to our area. Do you have a mission statement, Danielle, or have I kind of touched on it pretty well?
We do. So the mission for the Tuscaloosa County Economic Development Authority is to retain and expand existing industries, bring in new industries through business recruitment, and then also to facilitate business formation and talent attraction to lead to a better quality of life for all of Tuscaloosa County.
Mac, your job is to assist in that, attract businesses to come to our area. There's a lot of selling points for West Alabama, aren't there?
Oh, absolutely. There are a lot of competitive advantages to Tuscaloosa County and the whole region. You know, you have to start out with the talent that's coming into the University of Alabama. That's a great place to start to talk about it. So your workforce needs are taken care of here. And you also have a business-friendly environment with a lot of the local governments who are ready to accept new business and help that grow and do anything they can to make everybody prosperous and do well in the county.
Is it still attractive, too, that our area has relatively low taxes? No one likes taxes, but compared to some other parts of the country, this isn't a bad place if you have to pay taxes.
Oh, you're exactly right. That is one of the higher things on the site selection criteria. A lot of times when you see, especially some foreign direct investment coming in, they look at the Southeast and Alabama in particular because of those circumstances.
Danielle, whenever they were trying to attract Mercedes-Benz to the area, I remember the hoopla and people going, you're going to give them how much in tax breaks? No one talks about that anymore. The impact that that one company has had, among many other companies related to it, has really put West Alabama on the map. Is automotive at the top of the list of things that have changed our area for the better?
Of course, automotive has been vital to the growth, continued growth of Tuscaloosa County, the MSA, and the state of Alabama. You know, the location for Mercedes here in Tuscaloosa County really launched the automotive for the Southeast. So not only has it impacted our state and our community, but also the surrounding Southeast communities. And we continue to see that with their evolution into electrification of vehicles. And so, you know, with the bib plant coming online pretty soon and all of the suppliers that will be needed for electric vehicles, we're seeing a lot of activity coming in as a result of that. We're excited. Mercedes' partnership with Alabama Power and the University of Alabama for the AMP initiative is really a big part of our growth for the future.
What are the challenges going forward in the next few decades ahead of us?
Workforce is the #1 issue at the moment. That will continue to be for the time being. You know, that's not an overnight fix. We can train a lot of people who could be in the workforce right now, but who aren't necessarily in it.
Yeah.
But you're right, the long-term fix is education and getting those systems back up above par and getting those competitive with the rest of the country.
Lots of college opportunities, but there are more and more opportunities for folks that go, college isn't for me. I want to go out there and get a job pretty soon and make money. There are great opportunities for those folks too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there are plenty of opportunities in the county already with the existing industry that we have. So like you said, there's that opportunity, and there's also the opportunity for the folks who are coming into these 3 fine universities to, as soon as they get done, have a job ready for them, and hopefully we can continue to keep some of those that we're attracting here.
But how can folks watching get involved in promoting and helping West Alabama continue to grow and have opportunities for people to be employed?
Yes, we would love engagement for the community and for all the stakeholders in the area. If anyone wants to get in touch with us or to be part of promotion of Tuscaloosa County, they can go to our website at tcoeda.com and also check out our resource library. There are plenty of resources, videos with our existing industries, testimonials, quality of life videos.
I think she's done this before, don't you, Max? Danielle Winningham, Max Snyder, thank you both very much for bringing us up to speed and optimistic news about what all is going on in West Alabama. We appreciate your visit today.
Thank you so much, and roll Tide.
Roll Tide. Let's go back to Gary Harris.
Thank you, guys. And this is a story that we wish we didn't have to report on. Henry Ruggs involved in a car accident early in Las Vegas on Tuesday morning. According to police reports, he was driving 156 miles per hour. He has been charged with DUI and killing of a 23-year-old young lady, Tina Tintor, and it's just an unfortunate story. Nick Saban said this week you can have sympathy for the victims, but also have empathy and love for Henry Ruggs. And we'll be back after this. I'm Gary Harris. You're watching CTKO. Well, what about the rest of the SEC games going on this Saturday? Here's CTKO's Cooper Husky with Around the SEC.
To say Georgia's defense is just good is probably the understatement of the century. The Bulldogs' defense only gives up 6.6 points per game, which is the lowest in all of college football. That is less than a touchdown per game. The highest anyone has scored on them this season is 13 points. The last team to average less than a touchdown allowed per game was Oklahoma in 1986. Since then, no defense has ever finished the season under 7 points per game. Looking ahead to the rest of the games on Georgia's schedule, it is a real possibility that the Bulldogs could pull off this feat. From one world's largest outdoor cocktail party to another, Florida scored a touchdown with 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter against Georgia last week to extend their scoring streak to 417 games, which is a new NCAA record. The last time the Gators were shut out in a football game was 33 years ago on October 29, 1988, in a 16-0 loss to Auburn. For perspective, the last time Florida was shut out, a gallon of gas cost 90 cents. The #1 song on the radio was Groovy Kind of Love by Phil Collins, and the Iron Bowl was still played at Legion Field. One of the many new changes under the Harsin administration at Auburn is the use of tight ends in the passing game. Most plays the Tigers have run this year had at least one tight end lined up, and sometimes they even send out 2 or 3. As a unit, they have 37 receptions for 455 yards this season. That is more yards than the final 5 seasons under Gus Malzahn combined. Finally, Hugh Freeze returns to Oxford for the first time since leaving the Ole Miss program in 2017. Freeze became the coach of the Liberty Flames in 2019 and is 1-1 against top 25 teams. That's around the SEC. For CTKO, I'm Cooper Husky.
All right, Brianna is in with a final check of this gorgeous forecast.
Absolutely, Gary. Like I said earlier, temperatures quite chilly today and throughout the evening. Lower 50s and lower 60s all across Alabama today and tomorrow. Going to be a great fall weather. Once again, Sunday, temperatures going to be in the upper 60s. Expect sunny skies all throughout into your Tuesday of this week. It's really going to be a great one. Back to you, Gary.
All right, thank you. That's going to do it for CTKO. Join us tonight on WVUA 23 News at 10. I'll have a live report following the Alabama-LSU game. Have a great day, everybody. Enjoy the game. Roll Tide.